right, super. Thanks. Oh, I can hold it. I'll hold it here. It's fine. Do that there. All right, this thing's going to buzz at me if I talk for too long. Good morning, everyone. I guess some sore heads out there, but welcome. My name's Sam Chadwick, and I run strategy and innovation, or I'm one of the team members running strategy and innovation at Thomson Reuters. My particular space is blockchain. And so I've been involved in this for the last 3 years as we've been working out what role we can play in this ecosystem. For those of you that don't know our company, we are a service provider, an information service provider to professionals in financial, which you will probably have guessed already, but also in risk, in tax and accounting, and to the legal profession as well. We've been working on an oracle that enables our content to be available to smart contracts in Ethereum and in Corda. We're looking at other protocols as well at the moment. I could give you 20 minutes on why we selected the content sets on the right there, but what I should highlight is the fact that the cryptocurrency rates that were third up from the bottom were purely as a result of Reto coming to me doggedly over the last few years going, when am I going to get cryptocurrencies? When am I going to get cryptocurrencies? There hasn't been a single bank that we've been talking to that's asked for cryptocurrencies yet. Maybe that will change in the future, but it's through his diligence that we've got this data here now. And you guys are the first consumer of this, so congratulations. I thought I'd take a slightly different tack to this because there's a balance, and I didn't want to duplicate what Thomas was going to talk about. So what I thought I would cover today was 5 challenges that face thinking about data. Because in the discussions I've had last night and in previous conferences, there's a general misconception about how easy it is to get data from us into smart contracts. So I'm hoping this is a bit more of an education session and that it leaves you with a few pointers, 5 pointers. So the first is around identifiers. Now, if I were to show you the letter C on the NYSE exchange, what would it be? Anyone? Very good. Now, if I'd asked you that in 1998, what would it have been? It would have been Chrysler. So the thing with identifiers is that they often get recycled. So if you'd written a smart contract in 1998 that was calling out for Chrysler data, it would stop calling out for Chrysler data and you'd start getting answers for Citigroup, which is kind of not what you want when you've got a permanent smart contract that you can never change again. So what we've done is create something called PermID. It's a permanent identifier, and it's freely available for any of you guys to use when you're interacting with financial data. On blockchain, off blockchain, doesn't matter. And this is a number that won't change. So you know that by calling this reference, even if there's a merger, acquisition, some sort of corporate action takes place, you're always going to get the data back that you want. So for example, for Citi, it's that number over on the left. So you know, even if their ticker changes, you're always going to get the answer for Citi. Now, for those of you going, well, decentralized, centralized service, yes, this is a centralized service. We maintain it, but it's open and available and free to use under the Creative Commons license. Problem number 2, identity. Now, this isn't the identity you're thinking of when you're thinking of Viewport. This is the fact that data isn't freely open and available to everybody. So we manage tens of millions of different content entitlements at any one point in time. And what does that mean? That means if you're looking at analyst estimates, here's an example for Apple, then for some of these analysts, you're not allowed to see what they predict. Why? Because you're not their client. They don't want to provide that information to you. And it's not a question of, well, if I pay for it on a smart contract, then surely they would give me that data. No. They've chosen not because you are not their client. Now, of course, if you become their client, then maybe that number will light up. But it's our responsibility in the middle, as a distribution of this data, to enforce the entitlements of the content suppliers. So again, in discussions with people, I don't think many people realize that there's a massive entitlement system behind much of the world's financial data. So what we did was we built a capability called Block 1 ID. It's still in development. And this enables us to map Ethereum addresses to real-world authentication providers. So Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. If a corporate has their own, we can incorporate that as well. So we have our own internal one at Thomson Reuters, because you're not going to get a bank logging in to a system using Google. So that means that if somebody's using a smart contract and an Ethereum address, then we can identify who they are and enforce the correct entitlements, should they be able to see that data or not. Challenge 3, data volume. We distribute over 800,000 data points per second. It's a massive number. Now, if I were to save that data on Amazon S3 every day, it would cost me roughly $4,500. We don't use Amazon S3. We have other more redundant style ways of saving the data, storing the data. So $4,500 roughly. If I saved all that data on Ethereum, it would cost me $415 million per day. I simply can't do it. So when people come and say, well, can we just have a data feed? Just send everything you got. Somebody's got to pay that gas. That's a heck of a lot of cost. And everybody wants it on their own chain for their own contracts. And so we end up with, rather than a centralized store, and I know everybody can be against centralized things, but in some cases, not trying to store everything on every single chain is probably a smart idea. So think about the guarantees that blockchains offer, right? It's transparency of data, auditability of data, guaranteed computation, guaranteed execution of code, right? If you don't need those guarantees, then don't try and store all the data associated with it. Find some other way of doing it. Data quality. Now this, I thought I could give a really financial geeky example here. And then I thought, well, that wouldn't be any fun. So I tried to think of something easier. And Thomas even brought it up as an easy example earlier, which was quite funny. He said, what's the temperature in Zug? So I thought on Sunday, why don't I do what's the temperature in Zug? Because that's one that everybody can get their head around. If I were to ask you what the temperature in Zug is now, what would you do? Well, shout some numbers out. What is the temperature in Zug?
14.
All right, super. There's a random guesses taking place without reference to anything at all. The questions you need to ask first are actually, what do you mean, town or canton? I'll say town. Celsius or Fahrenheit? Celsius. At what point in time? You didn't say when. You're assuming I mean now. And at what altitude? Because if you keep going up, it's going to get quite a lot colder. But you're still in Zug. So specificity of questions and questioning becomes really important around data quality because of the quality of the answer. And I say this in particular because I've had a look at quite a lot of the prediction markets attempts that are on at the moment. And the specificity of those questions are nowhere near good enough for somebody, a data geek like me, to give the proper answer. So think about how you are querying, and the oracle that we have created and are creating take those sort of things into consideration. So, of course, I had to then go and find out what the temperature in Zug was on Sunday afternoon. So I thought, I'll go to the first website. They say 14, feels like 14. I thought, I better back that up by checking. Somebody else said, well, no, we think it's 12. And I was like, well, okay, best of 3. We think it's 17. So I messaged my wife and said, what temperature do you think it is? She says, it's 19, back on the messenger. And I replied, 19, question mark? She's like, what, you don't believe me? So sends me a picture. It's now 19. Now the problem is, it took her so long to reply, it's now 14:26, which is way after the 13:47 when I started doing this. So she might well actually be right. So of course, again, as a data geek, I'm now thinking, well, what about all the weather stations in Zug? How can everybody be so different? What have we got here? And so I found the unique identifier for the weather station in Zug and started reading the actual feed coming off the weather station to check now all of the metadata. And this is how you read a metadata from one of these weather stations, for those of you who don't know. So this is good, but it still didn't answer why is the data different? Why am I getting 3 different answers? So of course I start an internet search, and being in the blockchain space too long, I see this title come up in Google, latest technology at weather station provides us with proof. See the word proof? Brilliant, that's me. Blockchain, in on proof. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the Zug weather station, but it does say we've got a brand new weather station in Harm, which is just down the road. So this is great, and it updates every 10 minutes. So maybe there's something to do with a timing thing here going on. However, if you want to measure rain, which I didn't, fortunately, we only do that in Harm and Obereggery. So tough luck if you want rain information in Zug, we don't do that here. So of course, I was thinking, well, what about Obereggery and Harm? And so I did more search, and I found this guy, Roland Kaiser, who set up his own weather station because despite investing millions, the ones in Obereggery and Harm often don't actually publish any data. So of course, now I'm really interested, and I thought I'll go and find Roland Kaiser on Sunday afternoon. So off I went up to Eggery. I found his house. Unfortunately, he wasn't there, but I did find the weather station. So that's the weather station there. So of course, by now I'm coming home, and it's 6 p.m., and I've got still to work out why this data is different. So sitting on into the evening, here's why it's different. So all of them are polling data at different times. There are errors in data transformation. So some of them are going from Celsius into Fahrenheit and then back into Celsius, which is a double rounding error, which means you get 12 rather than 14. And then in many cases, the data was not available. So I was thinking, well, if I really want to know what the weather in Zug is, and there are these guys like Roland setting up his own station, is there anybody else? And the answer is yes, there are loads of them. But the problem is they all come out with totally different answers. You've got these guys, some of which who think that there's a minus 9,999 mile an hour wind going through Zug, which is going to be some sort of scientific phenomenon. You've got different altitudes. You've got some at the same GPS coordinates, but they're all updated at different points in time, which makes it really hard if you're a data vendor and writing a smart contract to pick which one. And you've even got massive outliers, right? This one, most recent, but he thinks it's 10 degrees hotter than anywhere else. So the takeaway for you guys is when you're thinking about data quality, think about accuracy, timeliness, and coverage. You've really got to think about that. It's not the case of just going and finding a vendor and that's it, right? So think very hard about this. Also, timeliness. What we see, particularly in this space, is there's a lot of copying. So quite often you'll get a shadow data provider that'll just take the data from somebody else and then publish another signal. And you think, oh, I've got 2 independent sources that corroborate one another, but actually underlying they're exactly the same thing. So the last challenge is incentives. I'm going to go fast. So A and B enter a contract. They both bet 1,000 francs and for whatever it is, and they're going to select an oracle. Now they've got 2 choices. They're going to either select on reputation, which is a form of quality, or they're going to select on cost. Now typically you would think the higher the cost, the better the quality. But let's say X is selected based on cost. Now the problem from an incentives perspective is that X charges nothing. They pick the cheapest one. But he can now take a bribe or bribe either one, the losing party, up to 999. Right? Because if B loses, A gets 2,000, B gets nothing. If B pays another 999, then they can swing the vote. They win 1, they paid 999, but they're still better off than having lost the 1,000 in the first place, right? Because now they've got 2,000 rather than 1,000. So you have this problem where if you only have one source, that source is open to a bribe, particularly an independent one, if they've got nothing else to lose, if they've got no reputation to lose. So, of course, you smart people would say, well, then what we'll do is we'll add some more oracles. We'll add Y and Z. But the problem is that the oracle's cost now triples, and they can still collude. You've got no way of working out, particularly if they know who you are. And it's very obvious for them to work out who you are, because all they do is they don't answer. And when they don't answer, you come and find them and say, I want to know why you didn't answer. And they've just revealed their identity. So A and B then can crowdsource the data. And we just saw what happened then. Then you have to worry about all of those individuals with the weather stations. They can do it on the open market, but the problem is then they need to reward everyone. And the issue with rewarding everyone, we found out, totally nothing to do with blockchain, is associated with data quality again. Right? If I ask all of you what the temperature is, I've now got to work out which are the high quality responses or not. And that costs a lot. So A and B could build their own reputation scale. That takes quite a while, a lot of investment. Or they could just take the reputation scale from the prediction markets. So they're all possibilities. So who would you trust for a prediction of Apple's earnings? This is what we would offer in Icon, and these are the top analysts and what they predict. So this is their estimate accuracy. Right? So some people are really not very good, but they'll still produce an estimate. And so you have an independent or a centralized player like Thomson Reuters aggregating all of that data and putting an analytic layer on top of it. Now, the thing about this is you've still got to ask what time frame. This is over one financial year. If I do it over one financial quarter, the answers are completely different. So you've got to think then reputation changes over time. And I know that sounds really obvious when you say it, but even judging the time period over which that person has built reputation changes. So the takeaway from this one is that X, that oracle, must see a net present value greater than 0 of whatever you're paying them, because otherwise they don't have an incentive to behave properly. Pay as you go is technically very feasible, but we're not going to see that in enterprises. I know you can say an oracle, you can just ping it once and you just pay a micropayment for that data point. There's no incentive on the oracle side if you do that for them to behave properly. Players focused on quality, if you drive down the cost to micropayments, are just going to move away from the commoditized data, the regular data, and they're going to start going into the analytics and charge for it. And then for all of you that are looking at this, the reputation algorithms are really worth looking at. There's a great paper by some guys that have tried to create an eigentrust algorithm. I'd recommend having a read of that. So to take away the 5 challenges, identifiers, identity, we sort of worked on at Thomson Reuters. Data volume, we live with every day. That's more to make you aware of it. Data quality, think about that a lot as you're thinking about interacting with oracles. And underneath, something I still haven't solved is around incentives. Now, these guys have done an amazing job at thinking about some of these problems and integrating the Thomson Reuters Oracle. It's open and available for you guys to look at as well on block1.thomsonreuters.com. It's been a real pleasure working with Melonport over the last year, 2 years, and they're really, really leading the way in getting these types of information into blockchain. So well done.
Thank you, Sam, for this insight.